Hello and welcome. Dennis Otundo here. Thank you for choosing my video. If you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. If you think someone you know can benefit by watching it, please share. And as always, please subscribe. I appreciate it very much. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we are going to look at unifactorial statistical methods. And in this we are going to look at all the designs that are used in medical research and the appropriate statistical methods to be used to analyze that data and give appropriate inferences. So if you want to compare two independent samples where the design is to compare two means, the basic assumption for the data will be the data has to be continuous and normally distributed. And if you want to know whether the data is normally distributed, you have to generate a normal curve and see whether there are any outliers in that data. And also the last assumption will be the data has to have the same variance. The statistical method to be used in this will be the t-test for two independent means. So if you also design a study whereby you want to compare two proportions, the basic data assumption should be that the data should be categorical, whereby you have two categories and all the expected values for that data should be greater than 5. And the statistical method to be used in this should be the chi-square test. If you design a study where you want to compare two proportions, the data assumption should be categorical, just as above. You should have more than two categories and the expected values for each category should be greater than 5. But the statistical method to be used in this is the Fisher's exact test. If you want to compare distributions, in this the data assumption is only one, where the data has to be ordinal. In this, the statistical method to be used is the Wilcoxon two-sample signed rank test. If you want also to compare time to an event, and this is mostly done in survival analysis, the data has to be continuous. That is the assumption that should be used. And the appropriate statistical method to be used in this is the log rank test. If you want to compare several independent samples, and by independent I mean that these are samples that are taken from different populations, or rather different sets of populations, and you want to compare whether there is any similarity or difference. If you design the study in such a way that you want to compare several means, the appropriate statistical method to be used in this is the one-way analysis of variance, which is commonly known as the ANOVA. The assumptions thereof is that the data should be continuous, it should also be normally distributed, and the variance should be the same. So if you also want to compare time to an event, and this please note that the samples here are independent. If you want to compare time to an event, the test with this appropriate statistical method is still the log rank test, and the data also has to be continuous. If you want to compare differences in a paired sample and you want to test whether there is a mean difference, the appropriate statistical method to be used is the t-test for two paired means. And the type of data should be continuous and it should be normally distributed for the differences. If you want to compare two paired proportions, the test is the McName test, and the type of data should be categorical, two categories which should be binary. If you design a study where you want to check the distribution of those differences, the appropriate statistical method to be used is the Wilcoxon matched pair test, and the assumption is that the data should be ordinal and there has to be the symmetrical distribution. If you want to look at the distribution of differences, you use sign test, and in this the assumption is only one, that the data has to be ordinal. If we want to look at the relationships between two variables, and you design a test whereby you want to test the strength of the linear relationship between two variables, the assumption is the data has to be continuous and at least one has a normal distribution, and the appropriate statistical method to be used in this is the Pearson correlation. If you want to test the strength of a relationship between two variables, it's different because here we will be testing the relationship between two variables. Previous appropriate statistical method to be used is the Spearman rank correlation, and the data assumption is that the data should be ordinal. If you want to examine the nature of the linear relationship between the two variables, the appropriate statistical method to be used is the simple linear regression. The data should be continuous, it should also be normally distributed, and the variance should be the same. And the normal distribution here will arise from the residuals of the two variables. If you want to test the association between two categorical variables, the appropriate test to be used is the most common chi-square test. But the assumption is that data should be categorical. There should be more than two categories for either of the variables that are being tested, and at least 80% of the expected frequencies should be greater than 5. So last but not least, if you want to test for trend in proportions, you should use the chi-square test for trend. Note this is different from the chi-square test. And the assumption should be the data should be categorical. One variable has two categories and the other has to have several categories which are ordered, and the sample should be greater than 50. So these are the types of designs that are available in any medical research study.